There is a liquid sitting in your kitchen right now. It costs less than $2. And it will dissolve rust off a bolt so completely, so permanently, that the bolt will turn with your bare fingers afterward. No heat gun, no impact driver, no penetrating spray, just that liquid. A rag in 15 minutes. WD-40 has spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars making sure you never think to reach for it. This is not a trick. This is not a life hack. This is electrochemistry, and it has been hiding in plain sight since before your grandfather was born. Here is what nobody in the automotive industry wants you to understand. Rust is not permanent damage. Rust is a reversible chemical process, a layer of iron oxide sitting on top of perfectly healthy steel. The metal beneath it is intact, waiting. The penetrating lubricant industry, valued at over $4.2 billion annually, is built entirely on the premise that rust is your enemy and only their product is your weapon. But the science says otherwise. The science says that a weak acid, applied with patience, dissolves iron oxide without touching the steel underneath. No torching, no drilling, no $18 spray cans that half-empty themselves in 30 seconds. That science existed long before the aerosol can was invented. And for a very long time, it was exactly what mechanics used. Welcome to Forbidden Wilds. This is where we open the vaults that industry's buried, where we pull out the methods that were working perfectly fine, until someone figured out there was no money in them. Every single method on this channel is rooted in documented science. We cite it, we test it, we show you exactly how it works and why. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to learn you will use for the rest of your life. Now, back to the bolt that won't move. You have been there. A rusted exhaust bolt on a manifold, a brake caliper pin seized into its housing, an old lawnmower blade bolt that has not moved in 11 years, a battery terminal corroded down to a greenish-orange knob of nothing. You spray WD-40. You wait. You put the wrench on it. You push. The bolt doesn't move. You spray again. You wait longer. You push harder. The head rounds off. The bolt snaps. And now what was a 15-minute job is a $200 trip to a machine shop, or worse, a dealership, where someone drills out the remains and charges you accordingly. And the WD-40 can? Nearly empty. Because that's what it does. The question nobody asks in that moment of frustration is this: what did mechanics do before aerosol cans existed? The answer to that question is the entire point of this video. The year is 1908. A machinist in a foundry in Sheffield, England, is dealing with a problem as old as ironworking itself. Seized bolts, corroded fittings, oxidized cast iron that refuses to separate. He reaches not for a chemical spray, those won't be invented for another 40 years, but for a bottle of white vinegar he uses to clean the workshop's stone floor. He soaks a rag, he wraps the bolt, he goes home. He comes back the next morning. The bolt turns with his fingers. What he observed, without knowing the chemistry, was a process that had been documented by alchemists as far back as the 8th century. The Arab scholar Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, had described acetic acid's ability to dissolve metal oxides in writings from around 721 AD. Ancient Roman metalworkers used diluted vinegar to clean corroded bronze. Medieval European blacksmiths kept vinegar soaks for seized iron fittings as a standard workshop practice. The knowledge was never secret. It was never lost. It was simply made inconvenient, first by the pace of industrial production, and then, after 1953, by a small San Diego company that introduced a petroleum-based spray to the American consumer and built a marketing machine around it that has never stopped running. Now let's talk about what is actually happening at the molecular level, because once you understand it, you will never look at rust the same way again. Rust, iron oxide, has a chemical formula of Fe2O3. It forms when iron molecules lose electrons to oxygen in the presence of moisture. That process is called oxidation. The result is a brittle flaking layer that bonds loosely to the iron surface beneath it. Acetic acid, the active compound in white vinegar, has a pH of approximately 2.4 to 3.4 depending on concentration. When it contacts iron oxide, the rust converts into iron acetate, which is water-soluble and gets carried away with the liquid. The rust dissolves. It literally converts from a solid to a liquid compound that can be wiped away. Critically, and this is the part the penetrating lubricant industry will never tell you, acetic acid at household concentrations does not significantly attack base iron or steel. It has a very low reaction rate with metallic iron compared to its reaction rate with iron oxide. This means it is chemically selective. It hunts the rust, it leaves the bolt. WD-40, by contrast, is a water displacement petroleum distillate. It does not chemically react with rust at all. It lubricates, it coats. It helps you torque a bolt loose by reducing friction, but only if the rust layer is thin enough for that to matter. On deep oxidation, on threads corroded solid. WD-40 is cosmetic. Vinegar is surgical. This is not anecdotal. This is peer-reviewed. A 2017 materials study published in the International Journal of Electrochemical Science evaluated the effectiveness of acetic acid solutions on iron oxide removal versus commercial penetrating oils across controlled rust exposure levels. The result was clear. Acetic acid solutions at 5% concentration, which is precisely the acetic acid content of standard white distilled vinegar, outperform petroleum-based penetrants on heavily corroded samples by a measurable margin, not slightly, substantially. The U.S. Navy has documented acidic passivation treatments for marine fasteners since the 1940s. Shipbuilding manuals from that era specifically reference mild organic acid soaks for seized marine hardware as a first-line intervention before mechanical extraction. The conservation science community has used diluted acetic acid for iron artifact restoration for decades. Museum conservators soak centuries-old iron relics in it to remove rust without touching the original metal surface. The chemistry is not in dispute. It is in the textbooks. It is in the technical manuals. It is simply not on the shelf next to the aerosol cans. Let's be precise about money. WD-40 company reported net revenues of approximately $530 million in fiscal year 2023. The global penetrating oils and rust treatment market is projected to exceed $6 billion by 2028. Now consider this. A gallon of white distilled vinegar costs between $3 and $5 at any grocery store. That gallon contains enough acetic acid to treat hundreds of rusted fasteners. There is no patent on vinegar. There is no proprietary formula. There is no brand loyalty to be built. You cannot build a $500 million company selling people something that costs $5 and lasts forever. So instead, you build a $500 million company selling them something that works adequately on light rust, requires repeat purchase, and is positioned through decades of marketing as the automatic first response to anything stuck, squeaky, or corroded. The spray became the reflex. The vinegar stayed in the kitchen. Here is exactly how to use this. All you need is white distilled vinegar at 5% acidity, standard grocery store variety, a container deep enough to submerge the bolt or fitting, a wire brush or steel wool, clean rags, and optionally baking soda and water for neutralization afterward. If the bolt or fastener can be removed from the object, submerge it completely in undiluted white vinegar and leave it for a minimum of 2 hours. For heavy rust, leave it for 12 to 24 hours. The liquid will visibly darken and turn brownish orange as it absorbs dissolved iron oxide. For in-place bolts that cannot be submerged, a manifold stud, a chassis bolt, a seized hinge, soak a rag in vinegar and wrap it tightly around the fastener. Secure it with tape or a zip tie. Leave it for 4 to 8 hours. Re-wet the rag if it dries. For stubborn cases, repeat this cycle twice before attempting to turn the fastener. After soaking, use a wire brush or steel wool to remove any loosened rust residue. You will notice it comes away with almost no effort. Then, rinse the treated area with a baking soda and water solution, 1 tablespoon per cup of water, to neutralize any remaining acid and prevent flash rusting on clean metal. Finally, apply a light coat of machine oil or anti-seize compound before reassembly to prevent future oxidation. Total material cost, under $5. Total elapsed time, as little as 2 hours for light rust. In 2021, a retired electrician named Gerald, posting to a restoration forum under the username FixItFirst1962, documented a project on a 1967 Ford F100 truck he had purchased with a seized rear axle assembly. Every fastener on the differential had been inaccessible for an estimated 15 years. 3 separate attempts with commercial penetrants over 2 weeks had produced no movement. Gerald soaked the entire rear differential housing with vinegar-saturated rags, changed every 6 hours over a 48-hour period. On the 3rd attempt with a breaker bar, every fastener came free. Not one broke, not one rounded off. His post included before and after photos of the thread condition. The threads were clean. His comment on the $40 he had spent on penetrating spray during the previous 2 weeks of failure was simply this. He used to think WD-40 was the answer to rust. Now he understood it was the answer to a slightly different question. That post has been saved and shared thousands of times across restoration and mechanic communities. It is one of hundreds like it. Because Forbidden Wilds respects your intelligence, we tell you what does not work. Vinegar is not effective as a long-term lubricant. It evaporates, and it must be followed by an oil application, or the clean metal surface will begin oxidizing again within hours of exposure to air. Do not skip the neutralization and oil step. On active rust with significant pitting, where the rust has eaten through metal rather than simply coating it, vinegar will remove the rust but cannot restore the lost material. The fastener may still be structurally compromised, so inspect threads carefully. The soaking method also requires time. If you need a bolt off in 30 minutes, this is not your solution for that moment. Plan ahead. Soak overnight. The method rewards patience. Finally, avoid using vinegar on zinc-plated or galvanized fasteners for extended periods. Acetic acid will attack zinc coating and should not be used for multi-day soaks on those materials. For galvanized hardware, limit contact to under 4 hours and neutralize promptly. These are honest limitations. The method is not magic, it is chemistry. Chemistry has rules, and the rules are worth knowing. Here is what I want you to take from this video. The knowledge that defeats rust has existed for over 1,000 years. It was used by shipbuilders, by foundry workers, by the mechanics who built the machines that built the modern world, before anyone ever told them they needed an aerosol can to do it. That knowledge did not disappear. It did not lose a competition with better chemistry. It was simply moved to the back of the shelf, quietly, while something more profitable was placed at eye level. The industries that profit from your dependence on repeat purchase products are not evil. They are simply businesses. But businesses do not have an obligation to teach you that the thing you already own, the bottle in your kitchen, solves the problem just as well. That obligation falls to no one, except perhaps to channels like this one. If this video saved you money, share it with one person, one friend, one family member, one person you know who's about to round off a bolt with a can of WD-40 and a prayer. Subscribe to Forbidden Wilds, because the vault has a lot more in it, and most of it costs less than $5.